Week 36, Overview. This is it. If you've been with us for one unit, you reached the end. If you've worked through all of year 4, congratulations. And if your family has been with Tapestry of Grace since the curtain rose on Egypt way back in year 1, you've finished one complete tour through world history. Well done. Tapestry of Grace includes a Bible survey in year 1 and a church history track through most of years 2, 3, and 4. We've reached the end of church history, so we're back to the Bible this week, as students read through Revelation. Whether your family has been following the church history track all year or not, I highly recommend reading Revelation out loud to your children. I'll talk about that more at the end of this overview. First, however, let's look back at what we've covered. Each of Tapestry's 4-year plans is divided into 4 units. Let's review those 16 units. The books of Moses started in Egypt, where Moses grew up. He led a nation of slaves into the wilderness and taught them where they'd come from and where they were going. We flashed back to the early history of Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, and the patriarchs who left that land for Canaan, then moved on to the Israelites' encounter with God at Mount Sinai and their conquest of the Promised Land. In the next unit, All Governments Are Established by God, we covered the ancient empires of the Middle East and the other early civilizations around the world. Then we visited Bronze Age Greece, the world of the poet Homer, and Bronze Age Israel. God established a kingdom under Saul and then gave David a kingdom that will never end. The third unit, Preparing the World for its Savior, starts with Israel's golden age. But Solomon's divided heart led to a divided kingdom. The Jews were buffeted by a series of hostile empires, annihilating the northern kingdom of Israel and exiling the southern kingdom, Judah, to Babylon. The Persians restored Jerusalem and fought the Greeks until Alexander the Great's conquests spread Greek culture across the Middle East. The last unit of year 1 is In the Fullness of Time. It covered Rome in the New Testament. We trace the rise of Rome through the phases of its republic and its empire. Jesus was born and crucified under Roman rule, and the church was born, grew, and suffered waves of persecution until Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of Rome. Year 2 began with the Middle Ages, which picked up at the fall of Rome. The Byzantine Empire, Islam, and feudalism led us to the pinnacle of medieval culture, the era of crusades and Viking raids, knights in shining armor, and wandering monks. Renaissance and Reformation covered 2 related movements that changed the face of Europe and the history of the world. When crusaders brought home forgotten works of the classical pagans, they spurred a new kind of art and literature in Europe, with an emphasis on beauty in the south and truth in the north. Columbus discovered a new world in the west, while Luther turned the old world upside down from his fresh reading of the Bible. Year 2, Unit 3 is Of Crowns and Colonies. It followed the new settlements on one side of the Atlantic and developments back in Europe on the other. The religious wars that rocked the Old World sent wave after wave of refugees to the New World, shaping the culture and character of 13 very different colonies. Year 2 ends with the Age of Revolutions. It started in the middle of the 18th century when Britain tried to make America pay for its own defense from the French and Indians. King George's clumsy efforts to tax his subjects led to controversy, conflict, and eventually war. America's revolt against the crown was followed by a very different revolution in France, ending the unchallenged age of kings and beginning a new era of republics. Napoleon's world brought us to the bloody beginning of the 19th century in Europe and the early years of the American Republic. Napoleon's war debts gave the United States the chance to buy the Louisiana Territory for a song, and France's invasion of Spain in 1808 triggered Simón Bolívar's campaign for the independence of South America. Year 3, Unit 2 is the Age of Industry and Expansion. That took us from 1825 to 1850. Andrew Jackson's rough-and-tumble democracy dominated the growing United States, while a young queen named Victoria breathed new life into the British monarchy. It was the age of the frontier for English-speaking people, with the Wild West in the U.S. and Britain's global expansion into Australia and other territories. Nations uniting and dividing dealt with the Civil War that split America and the Reconstruction period that tried to put it back together. The era we study began with the unification of Italy and ended with the formation of a German empire. The Gilded Age closed out the 19th century with European imperialism at the height of the Industrial Revolution. In the United States, it was the age of immigrants and robber barons and the dawn of the Populist Party and the Progressive Movement. The 20th century begins with casting off the moorings, which covered 25 difficult years. The serene confidence of the great powers of Europe was shattered in 1914. President Woodrow Wilson persuaded America to join the war to end all wars, but his hope for a permanent peace through a League of Nations fell flat. Social changes racked the post-war world, with Prohibition-era Americans indulging in frivolous or wicked acts, while post-war Germans starved, rioted, and dreamed of revenge. Depression and destruction summed up what happened next. The bottom fell out of the American stock market, and FDR tried to lead the nation through an economic crisis that seemed like it would never end. It took a new world war to jumpstart the American economy, a war that began for the U.S. with a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor and ended with atomic bombs on Japan. Germany had barely surrendered before the Allies shifted into a whole new Cold War. This unit ends with the creation of the State of Israel. Year 4, Unit 3, Conformity to Counterculture, began with the transformation of India and China. In the U.S., the greatest generation just wanted to get married, settle down, and raise babies, lots of babies. But a new Red Scare pitted American against American, and presidents sent troops and treasure overseas to contain communism in places like Korea and Vietnam. Black Americans struggled for equal treatment under law. As the boomers grew up to draft age, many rejected their parents' values to create their own counterculture. The postmodern world brings us to the present. This final unit has dealt with the end of the Vietnam War and the beginning of détente, a new relationship between the U.S. and China, and less strain between the U.S. and USSR. Ronald Reagan brought a whole new kind of conservatism to America, with low taxes, strong defense, and rising deficits. The Soviet Union, which couldn't match American spending on defense, ended with a peaceful but complete collapse that left the U.S. as the world's one superpower. The end of the Cold War didn't lead to global peace, however. It paved the way for a whole new kind of conflict. The world is as dangerous today as it has ever been. That's a sobering summary of human history, but it shouldn't surprise a Christian who's read the Bible. The book of Revelation tells believers about the things that must come to pass. I suggest that fathers end the family tour through human history with this book, because it is simultaneously sobering and uplifting. We don't know the details of the future, but we know the one part that really matters. Jesus wins. Some Christians spend way too much time analyzing Revelation, trying to figure out a day and hour that Jesus tells us we can't know. Other Christians pay way too little attention to a book that specifically announces a blessing on those who read it. Many who don't read Revelations enough don't read it because we don't think we can figure it out, but that's okay, because the point of Revelation isn't really to figure it out. My English Standard Version translation of Revelations 1:3 says, "Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear, and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near." There's really nothing like reading Revelation out loud. Reading the whole book at one sitting is a powerful experience. It builds your faith even as it humbles your reason. You don't have to stop and explain it as you go. Nobody expects you to be a walking commentary. You just have to read it like you believe it, and reading it out loud helps you believe it. I won't take up your time to explain the symbolism of the book. The first Christians to hear it didn't have, or need, a set of charts and graphs to show them what means what. When it comes to reading Revelation out loud, most of us need motivation more than explanation. If you choose to do it with your family, I trust that God will fulfill His promise to bless those who read and those who hear. With that, we reach the end of our journey together. It's been such a privilege to serve you as you lead your family's educational adventure. May God give you all you need to teach your children to love Him with all their heart, all their soul, all their strength, and all their mind. I look forward to meeting them and you before His throne.